Over my shoulder is the new Nissan Qashqai, a small SUV that's been out in Europe for some time, but it's been quite delayed for Australia, and Nissan is basically over the moon that their new small SUV has launched in time for Christmas. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, the Qashqai competes in one of Australia's most important segments, mainstream small SUVs. And at one point in time, back in 2008, looking back through the sands of time, the Qashqai was very successful here in Australia, selling almost 14,000 examples in a year. Most recently, the Qashqai sold more like 6,000 or 7,000, and Nissan is very keen to ensure that this new model gets back to those previous highs. So in today's video, we're going to check out this Qashqai Ti. It's 47 grand before on-road cost, so it has taken a bit of a step up in price. So we'll check out if it's worth it, and we'll take it for a drive here in Melbourne to start understanding where the Qashqai fits among its small SUV competitors. So before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe down below. Outside, the new Qashqai still looks like a Qashqai, at least in my opinion, but it does get a few cool new details like the name stamped into the front fender panels. That's kind of nice. But here inside, the small SUV takes a big step up in perceived quality. Build quality was actually very decent on the previous gen Qashqai, and that carries over to this car. Everything fits together well. You kind of get the sense that this is a solid car. But whereas the old Qashqai was very, very dated inside, the new model updates most of the visuals to make it feel more 2022 than the old version. And that really does start with the tech, which in the Ti is as good as it gets. So we've got a head-up display in color, a big 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, which has some level of customization. It's one of the better ones out there, actually. And also a 12.3-inch touchscreen that you get on almost all grades, but the Ti is the only car to get the full digital dash and head-up display. That being said, I think this is probably a little more expensive than most people will want to be paying for a small SUV, and the STL grade gets most of the goodies that you get on this car. However, if you like the look of these quilted leather seats, you are going to have to go for the Ti. They are quite comfortable, quite supportive, but I'll wait until I've done a longer drive in the Qashqai to make a final call on that, but my first impressions are pretty decent. Now, the steering wheel. Really love the look of this wheel. It looks like the one in the new Z car, and it's got this lovely, creamy, heated leather rim as well. But here's something that's weird about the Qashqai. The base ST and the second tier ST Plus have plastic steering wheels, and then the STL and Ti jump to this absolutely gorgeous, like Napa leather wheel. It's like, couldn't they all just have had like a grained leather wheel, and that way no one would have had to touch plastic while driving the car? Might not be an issue for you. I just think at, you know, near 40 grand on road, a plastic steering wheel is not good enough. In terms of other storage down here, we've got wireless phone charging, 2 decent sized cup holders, and a deep bin in here with both an old and a new style USB port as well for your charging. Nice door bins, and material quality on the whole feels, you know, pretty good. You know, it's reasonably premium. We've got soft material down here where your leg comes to rest. Overall, the Qashqai is one of the nicest small SUVs to spend time in. The new Qashqai is a bigger vehicle in every dimension than the old one, and you get some of the benefits of that change here in the back seat. So legroom, headroom, tow room, it's all pretty good, and you can get 4 adults easily into a new Qashqai. The 5th seat here, the middle seat in the back, is usable. It's a bit of a perch, but the floor doesn't have as much of a hump as some other small SUVs, so that's decent. And you get some amenities back here too. We've got air vents, we've got 2 more USB-C ports, we've got a flip-down armrest with cup holders, map pockets as well. We do switch to lower grade materials here in the back seat, but my one problem with the second row in this car is that the seat base is not elevated or tilted up enough, and so if you've got long legs, a bit like myself, you'll find that they kind of are not supported that well, and then you need to sort of splay out like this on road trips to stay comfortable. First world problem for sure, but some competitors have a nice tilted base that doesn't mean you have to do this. Moving around the back of the Qashqai now, it's quite fetching in this blue color, and if you go for the Ti, you also get a power tailgate, which you can open conventionally or with a kick to open feature. Once that gets out of your way, it's a good flexible space, and again, the Ti exclusively gets the flagship divide and hide storage feature in the boot. It'd be nice if that was range wide, but I kind of like clever boot functions, so divide and hide is cool in my books. You've got some storage off to the sides as well. The rear seats drop 60/40, but you have to go around the side of the car to get that job done. But then you've got up here buttons to close the boot or close it and lock the Qashqai. So behind the wheel of the new Nissan Qashqai, there's quite a lot to talk about because there's a lot that's new here, genuinely new. So the car moves platforms and it gets a new engine, and both of those things tend to really change how a car drives, and that's exactly the way it goes in the new Qashqai. So under the skin, Nissan has moved the car onto its CMF-C platform, and that's a small car platform that it shares with Renault. So it's sort of the same bones as a Renault Captur, small SUV, which you can get out here in Australia, but you don't see many of them. I'm sure the Qashqai will outsell that car. But the change to CMF-C means that it's a lot stiffer and more rigid than the old Qashqai, and that's the sort of thing that tends to make a car handle better. Now, on the sort of relatively brief drive that we've had on the car's Australian launch, there hasn't been too much high-speed driving on country roads, so I'm going to reserve sort of final comments about handling until we can get the car back in Sydney at our track on the roads we like to test cars on. But first impressions feel good, particularly because the steering is really nice, light and accurate, and it feels easy to place the car, and it's a doddle to drive in urban areas in particular, which we did do a lot of. It's easy to park. It's actually got an automated parking feature as well if you like that sort of thing. Visibility's great. The 360-degree camera works really nicely. So as an urban tool, the Qashqai feels good. The other big change is the engine. So the old Qashqai had a naturally aspirated petrol engine, no turbo, so you had to work it pretty hard in order to get up to speed, whereas the new car has a smaller engine, but it's got a turbocharger. So it's sharing its 1.3 turbo petrol 4-cylinder with the Renault Captur, but also with a bunch of Mercedes products which borrow this engine from Nissan. The Mercedes A180, a GLA, GLB, those cars all use this motor. But, and this is a big but, the Nissan has a CVT automatic rather than a dual clutch automatic like those cars have. But this is an instance where you actually want the CVT. A lot of people spend time complaining about CVTs, but they tend to go well when they've got a bit of torque. The Qashqai's got 110 kilowatts of power and 250 Newton meters of torque, and the CVT works really well. In fact, it's a lot nicer than the relatively clunky dry dual clutch that you get in the Renaults and the Mercs with the same engine, so the package is better in the Nissan. However, the one sort of takeaway that I've really kind of brought from this first drive is that the ride of the Qashqai feels very, very firm. Again, it's the sort of thing that I'm going to have to confirm when we do a longer test with the car, but particularly on country roads, compliance actually feels pretty mediocre in my opinion. You don't really sense this sort of compliance problem at urban speeds. Over speed bumps and dips and bumps at city speeds, it's completely fine. The ride seems okay. It's actually when you're at about 80, 90 k's an hour on a country road with a lot of bumps in it, the Qashqai feels quite flustered. Part of that might well be down to the large-ish 19-inch wheels that Nissan fits to the car, but the tyres are pretty chunky, so we shouldn't be feeling that many bumps in the road. I got the sense that you do though. So something like a Toyota CHR, that's probably a benchmark for ride quality in this sort of segment. I'm not sure the Qashqai is going to hit those highs of dynamic competence, but you know, again, as an urban tool, it feels well suited. It feels very, very decent. The other big development with the new Qashqai is that it's got a lot more safety tech. So all of the essentials are standard: reversing AEB, forwards AEB with junction assistance, lane keeping assist. It's only when you step up to the higher models though that you get Nissan's ProPilot system, which has the ability to manage traffic jams autonomously at low speed without you having to make a bunch of inputs. However, Australia still doesn't get Nissan's very advanced levels of safety tech that are available in the US, for instance, where there's actually a decent level of actual autonomous driving that the Aria EV, for instance, can do on roads over there. We haven't seen that tech rolled out in any Nissans in Australia yet, but I'm sure it's coming. So those are my first impressions of the new 2023 Nissan Qashqai. The next step will be to get the cars back to our test track in Sydney for full independent testing and a longer road loop to really get a sense of how this vehicle rides and handles in the country, which is just as important in Australia as how it goes in the city. But on these first impressions, the Qashqai is a definite improvement over the old one, particularly in the engine department and in how premium that interior feels. And of course, you are paying a lot more for the privilege as well, so make sure you test drive a bunch of cars in this segment before coming to a decision to make sure that you end up in the car that you like. Now, leave me your comments down below on the Qashqai. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss our car review uploads. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.